So it turns out that 61% of all rape accusations are reported false, according to Sheriff Roland Birmingham County, Idaho Police Department. 56% of false rape allegations are used as an alibi to cover up consensual sex. A married 30-year-old female reported that she had been raped in her apartment complex. During a polygraph, she reported that she had been raped because her partner did not stop ejaculation as he agreed, and she was afraid she was pregnant and her husband was overseas. So essentially, she reported this, they put her under a polygraph, and she cracked. Now, we can agree that the ejaculation situation, that's not great, right? But that is not the same thing as being pulled off of the side of the road, held at knife point, and being overtaken. And you think, how did we get here? And what you'll notice is when feminists get into the legal system, what they have a tendency to do is change the definition of everything to be more broad. Because the broader you make it, the more men can be thrown in prison, fired, etc., because oftentimes these cases, it's up to the discretion of a judge. So the old definition of rape was the carnal knowledge of a female forcibly and against her will. So essentially, forced sex. And the new definition is penetration, no matter how slight, of the vagina or anus with any body part of object or oral penetration by a sex organ of another person without the consent of a victim. Now, what is the key word in there? And I want you guys to be able to hear this because when you hear people telling stories, there's certain key words that you have to be able to pick up to understand what they're really saying. So the key word is consent. What is consent? And this is where things get a little bit gray. Now, oftentimes what you hear is, I said no, or no means no. But when you get the experience of men telling you stories or situations they've been in, oftentimes women will say that and then change their mind. So what happens if they initially said no and then changed their mind later? They can still say that they said no. Okay. The other thing is they add in new words to include more behavior that they just don't like. Now, again, I'm not saying that these behaviors are moral or immoral, but let's not pretend it's the same thing as being held at knife point, pulled off the side of the road and having onto the side of the road and being forced to have sex against your will. Though we can agree those are completely different things, right? Coercion is defined as the use or threatened use of lawful force upon any person which induces him or her to do an act against his or her will. So the key word in this is threatened use. The use or threatened use of lawful force upon any person which induces him to do an act against his or her will. Now, when I hear this, I think, knife point, gun point, or I'm going to go get a gun. I'm going to shoot your face. That's what I think of. But when I hear it in practice, they're able to put in, oh, I thought he might get a gun, or I felt like he was going to hurt me. I don't think that's the same thing. Sexual assault is sexual contact or behavior that occurs without explicit, consent from the victim. Sexual battery, forced or attempted oral, anal, vaginal penetration by using a sexual organ or object simulating a sexual organ, or the anal or vaginal penetration of another body part or foreign object. Both males and females can be victims of sexual battery. Then you get abuse. Now, abuse used to be physical abuse. He hit me, I didn't hit back. He hit me for no reason. Then they broadened the definition. So they included things like spiritual abuse. So if you force your woman, the trads will always say, pray every day, then she won't leave you. If you force her to pray, that could be spiritual abuse. And it holds up in court, family court anyways. On top of that, they have emotional abuse. So the shift from defining domestic abuse solely as physical violence to include emotional, psychological, and economic abuse began in the 1990s, particularly with the passage of the Violence Against Women Act in 1994. While the Violence Against Women Act initially focused on physical violence, subsequent reauthorizations and interpretations broadened its scope. So remember, they changed the definition and they broaden it. That's how they do it. The term domestic violence was officially expanded in federal and policy contexts during the early 2000s when legal and advocacy efforts started incorporating non-physical forms of abuse. For instance, the 2000 reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, this included funding and legal recognition for programs addressing emotional abuse and broader dynamics of power control within abusive relationships. So who defines what emotional abuse is? Who defines it? Do the men get to define it? Or do the women get to define it? By the early 2010s, agencies like the Office on the Violence Against Women and state laws began formally recognizing emotional, psychological, and financial abuse as key components of domestic violence. Broad public recognition, legal and cultural definitions were increasingly informed by frameworks like the Duluth model, which emphasized patterns of coercion and control. So this is what they do. They first change the definition of the words. Then they add in more words to criminalize behaviors they don't like. So if a guy talks to you in the wrong way, that's emotional abuse. If he makes you go to church, that's spiritual abuse. If he says, no, don't spend $10,000 on the credit card this month, that's financial abuse, especially if she's a stay-at-home wife. And they essentially, any behavior they don't like, they just criminalize. Now, I am not saying that some of this behavior that we're talking about isn't immoral, but I don't think every immoral situation needs to be criminalized, like cheating. If somebody cheats, it's wrong, but do they need to go to jail? I don't think so. Now, the emotional abuse definition is the intentional infliction of distress, anguish, or intimidation through non-physical acts. So if I'm distressed, okay, let's say the guy cheats on me and I'm distressed. Is that emotional abuse? You could say it's wrong, or maybe he yelled at me in a way I don't like and I'm very, very distressed. Is that emotional abuse? And that's why you see the conservative commentators, you saw Candace Owens, accuse Steven Crowder of emotional abuse. That's why I say that when push comes to shove, they will act just as feminist as the liberals, because you have Candace Owens, a conservative commentator, accusing Steven Crowder of emotional abuse because he spoke to his wife in his house in a tone that she deemed as wrong. Never apologized. And Lauren Southern, same thing. Her reputation was at a wall because she was a conservative commentator and divorced. Then what does she do? She releases a long video accusing everyone of SA and abuse. Like that's the tactic they go to. And really, feminists, they openly admit to this. Catherine McKinnon, a feminist, says, I call it rape whenever a woman has sex and feels violated. Now, again, it goes based on the woman's feelings. So if she feels like she was spiritually abused, she feels like she was emotionally abused. And you see the same thing in cases like Zach Bryan and Brianna Chicken Fry. After the relationship, she felt like she was emotionally abused. So clearly she was, right? She also said, all heterosexual intercourse is rape because women as a group are not strong enough to give meaningful consent. Another male feminist says, as men, we have no right to tell women what rape is. We have no right to weigh in on the logistics of what constitutes rape. Our role is to shut up and stop raping people. I mean, this is insane. And I want to show you how feminists either convince other women that they were assaulted and raped when they weren't, or I don't know if the other women are convinced or they're doing it maliciously. Let's say for the sake of this argument, they're convinced, right? I'm going to show you what goes on during this.
Hey everybody, a little while ago, I got a letter from one of you wonderful viewers whom I cherish. I wasn't able to stop thinking about it. That to me says, well, let's talk about it. In a nutshell, what happened to this person, and I have a feeling has happened to a lot of other persons, was a situation involving someone this person knew, mix in alcohol and drugs, sex consensual up until a point to which it is not anymore. And this person put up resistance, not in the form of directly saying no, but trying to communicate in other kinds of body language. And
Okay.
It continued. The next morning, this person woke up.
So she's saying that the person did not say no, but tried to communicate with other types of body language. Now, again, is this the same thing as being taken by knife point? A very awkward encounter.
With a hazy idea of what had happened, but a very clear feeling and gut instinct that something had gone wrong, that something had been violated. This person has carried this around for years. A lot of times, I think there is this question going on and on and on in the brain of, well, was it really rape? Can I call it sexual assault? Does that make my friend a rapist? We compartmentalize it as small as we can and we put it away, not only because of the implications of what that means for us, but also the implications of what that means for the other person. When it comes to that question of was it rape, I can tell you what the legal definitions of rape and sexual assault are. I can also tell you that those legal definitions will change in the United States depending on what state you're in. But to hopefully add a little more nuance to those definitions and stats and facts, I do want to offer things that don't disqualify, double negative alert, people or situations from being rape or sexual assault. When it comes to the question of was it rape, the answer may be yes, even if you know the person, even if you were both drunk and or otherwise intoxicated.
Okay, so she's saying you might not be able to legally consent due to alcohol and drugs. So you're both drunk. One of them, one gender, can call grape. The other can't.
You're both drunk and or otherwise intoxicated. Even if you never said no. Even if it started off.
Okay, so now, even if you never said no, they can still, that still doesn't take it off the table.
Sensual. Even if you felt personally guilty afterwards, even if you never contacted the police, even if you've never been able to bring yourself to call it rape or sexual assault because it just feels too ugly or too traumatic or too hurtful, even if something happened and you aren't entirely sure what it was, but you have that gut feeling that it was not right, that a violation occurred, trust that instinct. It doesn't matter if it happened 20 minutes ago or 20 years ago.
Okay, so if you have this feeling, if you feel like it happened, it's real. If you feel like you were raped, you totally were. And so what happens is these type of videos are pushed out at institutions, at work, even sometimes at police departments. They've brought in the definition. It's tougher in criminal court, but they push these videos, and oftentimes the judge, trial, and jury is in their special court. So what happens is there's family court, there is courts that are just at school. I believe there's military courts, and those don't have the preponderance of evidence that they have in criminal court. So criminal court, it needs to be above 90%. Balance of probabilities is above 50%. So it needs to be 51% likely that it happened instead it didn't happen. And then what you can do is they can revoke the opportunity from the men. They can kick them out of their job, put them on military leave, like whatever it is. It depends on the court, right? But that's how they do it, is they brought in the definition. And now she's including more things. She's saying, well, even if you didn't say no, it could still be great. When 20 years ago, that word was simply forced sex. Now it's sex without consent, that if you drank too much, now you didn't give consent. If you might have even said no and then changed your mind, or said yes and then changed your mind. You didn't even have to say no. And maybe if you feel violated after, it was grape.
Is no statute of limitations for personal healing that can take place by first reaching out to those resources available, whether it's someone with your school's counseling center or reaching out to a local rape crisis center or calling a rape crisis hotline, having someone you can talk to finally answer that question that goes on and on and on and on in your brain of was it rape? Was it rape? Am I just making all of this up? From there, speaking of legalities, who can help you decide if and whether that is a path that you want to pursue. And that, my friends, in terms of reporting things to the police and pursuing that is up to you. I simply want to encourage you to take advantage of the resources that are available in the time that you need to do it. What I'm most concerned about right now, where I'm sitting, is you and the people that I hear from who carry these questions around in their brain for years, and even carrying it around an hour or a day is too long. If the main thing that's holding you back is fear that someone won't believe you, here's one person. I believe you. I also want to know.
So she knows no facts. No facts. Any story. This is ridiculous. But the reason I brought this up was I wanted to show you guys the types of videos that they push at a lot of these institutions in order to basically maybe convince women that they were raped or encourage more women to report sexual misconduct under the guise of these new definitions. You guys are amazing. Seriously, I don't know what I would do without you guys. Thank you. Like the video on your way out. Subscribe to the channel, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. See ya.